Hey, Yetta, do you really respect me? Like, really, really respect me?
I do.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward together with the Decker team.
Welcome to another episode of Life's Inside Track. I'm Yetta Decker.
And I'm Ken Decker.
And we're excited because we get to share techniques, thoughts, tips, tools, and tactics that we all need. You, I, everyone. So we can turn our house into home, our families thrive, and we get to live the best life possible. Mm-hmm. We're going to consider how and kind of why we deregulate, especially with the most important people in our life. Our emotions kind of take us out of the game for a moment.
Yeah. So when you say deregulate, you mean not that you have emotions, but your emotions start controlling you, and you as in you or I or anyone loses their ability to keep control.
Right. Rather than keeping our emotions, what we say, and our mentor from like 25 years ago, Diana, taught us, keep your emotions between the lines. Mm-hmm. So there is a variation on our emotions. I don't want to be flatlined, and I don't want you to be either. And yet when the emotions get too far out of the control, we're in a deregulated state. Mm-hmm. We're not able to regulate and be calm, cool, and collected, even if we're excited. Like you can still be excited and still have a sense of calm about you.
Yeah. And the other morning we spent a couple hours discussing triggers and what caused them and what our behavior was like and how it's changed. And we thought, you know what? This might be a great show. Now it's close to heart because it's our experiences, and it's a little scary doing this. Actually, the show's a little scary.
It'll probably be scary for you too, because you're thinking there are things I didn't think I wanted to know. And yet, at least from my experience of living life, and in the past, these things would happen to us a lot more than they do now. And yet we have a tendency to think that when we do fly off the handle or deregulate, as a more kind word, I guess, or a less emotional word, that we're the only ones. Like if you ever found yourself thinking, well, they don't do that. They don't do that. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, those things that we tend to think are unique to us are often the most universal. And when you hear someone else share the story, you go, oh, there are ways to process this and to navigate and to come back from a deregulated state. And it doesn't have to take 3 days. It can happen in a couple of seconds and certainly in a couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm. And I know that when we used to deregulate, in the beginning, it was days, maybe weeks of us being at odds with each other.
Right.
And so just know that we've come from a place of what I would call dysfunction.
Yeah.
And moved to a place of what I'd call functionality.
Right.
And it's not that we never get triggered or never deregulate. And we're going to talk about how that's changed for us and how we made those changes.
Right. Because you may be able to grab something from it and say, I'm going to try that on like I would try on a coat, test it in my own experience in my own life, and see if it works for me. Because none of this stuff we teach you pretty much, except solid real estate strategies, are a one size fits all. And even then a different strategy for a different person.
Yeah.
Right. And so your big thing you started the show with was respect.
Yes. And you know, it's like people say, I like unconditional love. There's a thing called unconditional respect, but it's almost unheard of. And most people say, respect, you need to earn my respect.
Right.
And you'll lose my respect. And I had this thing about wanting my kids to respect me. I wanted to be right. I wanted my actions to be right. And I wanted them to respect my commands, basically, right? And then I ran into a strong-willed child named Ryan, and we hit heads from time to time. And what I found was because I wanted respect, I got louder, I got angrier, I was yelling. And did I get compliance? Yeah, kind of in the end. But I got compliance out of fear. He feared me as opposed to compliance out of respect for me.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Right. So as we talked about becoming deregulated, you didn't do those things in a normal course of the day.
No.
It was when something that didn't feel good to you, likely connected to your past, that you had an experience previously where that just felt not good to you.
Yeah, I remember a specific time where I wanted him to go to his room. He had to go past me. I'm yelling at him. You're very upset with my behavior. My daughter's crying, and he's afraid to go past me to go into his room where I want him to go. And because in the past he'd said no when I told him you have to go in your room. And that was disrespectful to me. And so I elevate, I get aggravated, I get deregulated, and then he gets more deregulated. And when maybe you've had this occurrence where at first it was discipline, then it became punishment, because as he deregulated, he had a harder time responding to me, and I would add more punishment to it, more time. Okay, you've lost your computer for half a day. Okay, you've lost your computer for a day. Okay, you've lost your computer for a day and a half. You lost your computer for a week. And it just kept escalating. But when he was in that state of fear and escalation, he couldn't respond the way I needed him to respond.
Or even the way he wanted to respond. I think that's the really important thing to consider, that in an deregulated state, no one in the situation is responding, generally speaking, as they desire to. They're responding out of, could be fear, could be frustration, could be lack of respect. It could be all kinds of reasons for the trigger. And yet no one is responding rationally.
Right. So when I finally got him to go into his room, then I go into my room. And then I'm sitting on the bed going, oh my gosh, what have I done? This is the family that I love. I've made them fear me. You know, I heard my dad saying things that I said that I swore I would never say. And I'm thinking, like, who let my dad in the room? And then I'm thinking, have I failed as a father? And just sitting on the bed there contemplating. Now, you might know that Ryan and I have a beautiful relationship in adulthood, and that there's been much forgiveness for, my anger, my things that I've done in the past. But learning what triggered it, now as we contemplate different triggers and different things, we can go deep. And the only way to change those behaviors is to go deep in your thoughts and your conversations, so you can find out where it's coming from.
And once you can discover that, you can unpack it, because it's not as though the event happened and now the outcome is there immediately. There is time to pause and reflect and not fly off the handle or lose it.
Right.
And yet without some pause, some stillness, some quiet, we'll likely not do a good job in the heat of the moment.
Right. And then I have to sit there and look at, okay, what story am I telling myself that's causing that behavior? And what am I getting from that behavior? What end result, a positive result am I getting that maybe a different behavior would get me an even better result?
Right.
But I haven't thought through that well enough to get there.
And so ultimately, when we have a trigger, it's an indication that there's something from the past that we need to go back and address.
Right. So we're grateful to be your partners on this journey towards wisdom, wealth, and worth.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward.